It was a cold, gray morning, the kind of day when the air feels heavy and quiet. The Osbourne family's country estate was covered in a soft mist, and the grass was wet with dew. People moved slowly, dressed in black, their faces sad and pale. This was the day they were saying their final goodbye to Ozzy Osbourne, the man the world knew as a rock legend, but who was, to his family, a husband, father, and grandfather. Among the mourners stood Aimee Osbourne, the eldest daughter. She was apart from the others, near an old yew tree at the edge of the courtyard. From there, she could see everything. The guests arriving, the coffin being carried inside, her mother Sharon leaning on Kelly for support. Aimee had always been the quiet one, the daughter who stayed out of the spotlight. Even now, she didn't rush forward. She stayed back, watching. The coffin was made of dark polished wood, lined with deep red velvet inside, and covered with roses. Jack, her brother, was one of the pallbearers. His face was tense, and he didn't look in Aimee's direction. Kelly stayed close to their mother, her arm around Sharon's waist as if afraid she might fall. Sharon looked smaller than she ever had before, her usual strong, confident presence replaced by grief. Inside the chapel, the service began with the hymn Amazing Grace. The slow, sad notes filled the air. The walls were lined with pictures of Ozzy, on stage, at home, smiling with his children. One photo caught Aimee's eye. It showed Ozzy sitting on a studio floor, barefoot, feeding crumbs to a little bird. It was a private, gentle moment, far from the wild image the public knew. When the eulogies began, Jack spoke first. He told stories of life on tour with their dad, the chaos, the funny moments, and the quiet times when Ozzy was just Dad. Kelly went next, reading from a crumpled piece of paper. Her voice shook as she spoke about a father who had lived a big, wild life, but still made midnight pancakes just to make his kids laugh. Then Sharon stood up. She didn't have notes. Her voice was strong, but filled with emotion. She spoke about their first meeting, their love, their battles, and the life they built together. But when she spoke about Ozzy's last days, her voice broke. He asked me for 3 things before he passed, she said, looking out at the guests, and for a moment, her eyes landed on Aimee. I gave him everyone. After the service, the coffin was carried outside to be lowered into the ground. The sound of dirt hitting the wood was deep and final. Sharon stepped forward first, placing a folded piece of paper on top. Jack followed with one of Ozzy's favorite guitar picks. Kelly laid down a black scarf decorated with silver bats. Then all eyes turned to Aimee. She walked forward slowly. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small cassette tape, an old recording of her father strumming his guitar, made before she was even born. It was something she had kept for years. She placed it gently on the coffin. Sharon watched her closely. For a second, it looked like Sharon wanted to reach out and take Aimee's hand, but she stopped herself. As the last bit of soil was placed over the coffin, Aimee stepped back. People around her hugged, cried, and shared memories, but she didn't join them. She walked back toward the yew tree, standing quietly. Moments later, Sharon came to stand beside her. They both looked at the fresh grave. He wanted you here more than anything, Sharon said softly. More than the music, more than the legacy. Just you. Aimee turned to her mother, but before she could say anything, someone called Sharon back. She touched Aimee's hand for only a moment and then walked away, leaving Aimee standing alone under the tree, wondering if that had been an invitation to come closer to her family or a final goodbye. The day of Ozzy Osbourne's funeral would remain in the memory of everyone who attended, not just because it marked the end of an era in rock history, but because of the emotions that swirled quietly between the people who knew him best. And for Aimee Osbourne, it was more than just a day of loss. It was a day every choice she had made in her life, to stay away, to stay quiet, to protect her privacy, came back to stare her in the face. After the burial, guests moved toward the reception hall, a large tent set up in the garden. Inside, tables were lined with photographs, gold-framed and glowing under soft candlelight. The air was heavy with the scent of roses, lilies, and the faint smell of incense burning in the corner, something Sharon had insisted on, because Ozzy loved it. Kelly was surrounded by friends and family, her grief expressed loudly, openly, her voice rising and breaking as she spoke to people about her father. Jack moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting hugs. Sharon, though clearly exhausted, managed to thank everyone who came. Aimee, however, stayed near the back. She was polite, speaking to anyone who approached, but she didn't seek out conversation. She never had. For years, she had been called the Invisible Osbourne, the sister who never appeared on the Osbournes, the daughter who didn't attend red carpets or reality show events. People speculated endlessly about why. Some said she thought she was too good for it. Others believed there was some deep feud. The truth, like most truths, was more complicated. The early years. Aimee Rachel Osbourne was born in 1983, the first child of Ozzy and Sharon. From the start, she was different from her siblings. She was quieter, more serious, and more private. Where Kelly and Jack craved attention, Aimee preferred books, music, and long stretches of time alone. Her father, despite his wild stage persona, understood this side of her. Late at night after concerts, he would sometimes sit with her in the kitchen, making tea and talking about music. Those were their best moments, when the chaos of the outside world couldn't touch them. But the chaos always returned. Life with Ozzy Osbourne as a father was unpredictable. There were moments of joy and love, but also fights, substance abuse, and endless attention from the media. Aimee learned early how exhausting that attention could be. The choice to leave. When MTV pitched the Osbournes in the early 2000s, the family was divided. Kelly and Jack loved the idea. Sharon saw it as a business move that could secure the family's financial future. But Aimee saw something else. A trap. She knew that reality television would expose every flaw, every argument, every weakness, and that once those moments were on film, the world would own them forever. So, at just 16 years old, she made the choice to move out of the family home. She stayed in Los Angeles for a while, living with friends, then eventually moved to New York. It wasn't an easy decision. It meant missing out on family dinners, on casual moments with her dad, and on seeing her younger siblings grow up. But it also meant protecting herself, the growing distance. In the years that followed, Aimee and her siblings saw less and less of each other. Kelly, in particular, took Aimee's absence personally. She saw it as a rejection, not just of the show, but the family itself. Jack, too, didn't understand why his big sister didn't want to be part of what they were building. From the outside, it looked like Aimee had cut herself off entirely. In truth, she still spoke to her father regularly, though their conversations were private and off the record. Sharon also stayed in touch, though their relationship could be strained. Aimee's independence sometimes clashed with her mother's strong, controlling personality. The return. Years later, when Ozzy's health began to decline, Aimee started visiting more often quietly, without public announcements. She would stop by the family home when cameras weren't around, sitting with her dad, playing him songs she had written, or listening as he told stories from the early days of Black Sabbath. By the time he passed, she had been there more than anyone knew. Still, the funeral was the first time in many years that the entire family had been together in public, and the old tensions resurfaced instantly. In the tent after the burial, Kelly caught Aimee's eye across the room. It was not a friendly look, but it wasn't entirely hostile either. It was more like an unspoken question. Why now? Why here? Aimee looked away. Jack, always the peacemaker, stopped by to hug her. Glad you came, he said quietly. He would have wanted this. Aimee nodded but didn't answer. Sharon, on the other hand, approached her with a steady gaze. You know, she said, he left you something. We'll talk later. She didn't say what it was, but the tone suggested it was important. That night, after the guests had gone, the family gathered in the study to read the will. That's when the surprises began. Surprises that would set the stage for everything that came next. The study in the Osbourne family home was dimly lit that night, the only light coming from a single lamp in the corner. It cast long shadows over the heavy wooden table, where the family now sat. Ozzy's framed photographs lined the walls, some from the Black Sabbath days, others showing him cradling his children when they were small. The air felt heavy, not just with grief but with tension, the kind of tension that makes every sound, the creak of a chair, the turning of a page, feel louder than it should. The lawyer, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and round glasses, began to read. Sharon sat at the head of the table, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly together. Jack sat beside her, his expression calm but guarded. Kelly leaned forward, arms crossed. Aimee sat opposite her, quietly watching. Most of the will was what they expected: properties, investments, and music royalties carefully divided among family members. But then came the part that made the air shift. To my beloved Aimee, the lawyer began, glancing briefly at her before continuing. I leave the property in Buckinghamshire, the home where you and I share our longest conversations. May it always be a place of music, peace, and love. Kelly's head snapped toward her sister. Her jaw tightened. The Buckinghamshire estate was not just a home. It was the Osbourne home, the heart of the family history. It was where their most famous memories, both good and bad, had unfolded. The lawyer continued. I also leave Aimee the original masters of my unreleased recordings, those we listened to together during her visits. Kelly's voice broke the silence. Wait, what? That's everything. That's our family's legacy. Sharon turned to her, her voice low but firm. Kelly, stop. This isn't the time. But Kelly didn't stop. She wasn't even there for most of it. She didn't do the shows. She didn't take the hits from the press. She didn't. Aimee's voice was quiet but steady. I was there for him, Kelly. Maybe not for the cameras, but I was there. The lawyer pressed on, but the mood had shifted completely. The next surprise came when the lawyer announced a small but shocking clause. A portion of Ozzy's estate had been left to a man few in the room had ever met. A man the lawyer described as Ozzy's son from a relationship before his marriage to Sharon. Whispers filled the room instantly. Sharon's eyes narrowed. She knew about this son. The existence of Louis Osbourne from Ozzy's earlier relationship had never been a complete secret. But the idea that Ozzy had left him something significant in his will clearly stung. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that, in his final act, Ozzy had reached out beyond the walls of the family they had built together. Kelly muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable." Jack, looking weary, simply rubbed his face. "This is going to be a mess," he whispered to no one in particular. As the reading ended, Sharon rose from her chair, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her. She looked at Aimee for a long moment, not with anger, but with something harder to read. "I hope you understand," she said softly, "that it's not about who he loved more. It's about what he wanted to protect." Aimee nodded, but inside, her emotions were tangled. She had never asked for the estate. She had never wanted to be in the middle of a fight over property or music rights. But now she was, and the fact that it was her father's dying wish made it impossible to refuse. That night, alone in her flat, Aimee sat at her piano, the one Ozzy had bought her when she was 18. She pressed the keys slowly, letting the sound fill the room. On the stand was an old cassette tape, one of the recordings her father had left her. She pressed play. His voice, younger and stronger, came through the speakers. "Aim, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm gone. Just remember, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You've always known who you are. That's your gift. Don't lose it." Tears blurred her vision. She thought about all the years they had lost, not in love, but in time spent together. She thought about the funeral, about Kelly's glare, about Sharon's silence. And she knew that the days ahead would not be peaceful. In the weeks after the funeral, the media caught wind of the inheritance details. Headlines speculated about a family feud. Some articles painted Aimee as the Ice Queen, who had swooped in at the end to claim the biggest share. Others accused Sharon of playing favorites. And the revelation about Ozzy's son from his earlier relationship only fueled the fire. Friends urged Aimee to speak out, to set the record straight, but she stayed silent. She knew the truth, and she knew her father had trusted her to hold it quietly. What no one outside the family knew was that before he died, Ozzy had asked Sharon to bring 3 special items to decide his final days: a Beatles vinyl they had listened to together, his favorite crucifix necklace, and a photograph of him and Aimee sitting in the garden at Buckinghamshire, both of them laughing. Sharon had fulfilled that wish. Even Kelly didn't know about that photo. As winter settled in, Aimee visited the Buckinghamshire estate for the first time since the will was read. The halls were quiet, the air still carrying a faint scent of incense. She walked through each room slowly, stopping at the old study where her father had once recorded late into the night. In that moment, she realized that the property wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. It was a living archive of their family's history, the kind of history that could either heal or divide them. She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to him. She would protect it, not for herself, but for all of them, even the ones who didn't understand why he had chosen her. Yet, deep down, she knew the story was far from over. The wounds between her and Kelly were still raw. Sharon's feelings about the will were still a mystery, and the presence of Ozzy's estranged son in the inheritance had opened a door that could never be closed again. For now, the Osbourne family's future was uncertain, and as the tabloids circled and whispers grew louder, Aimee could only hold on to her father's last words to her. "You've always known who you are. That's your gift. Don't lose it." And somewhere in the stillness of that estate, she felt that maybe he was right.